Hey everyone, welcome back to Rally Caps. It's a podcast for artists, entrepreneurs, and everybody in between. I'm Steven.
And I'm Eric.
And today we have a very, very special friend on the show.
He's a filmmaker, storyteller, runner hailing from the state of Mississippi. He's accrued a following on Instagram of nearly 75,000 people in a year's time due to the popularity of his daily series titled The Daily Mile. He boasts a modest near 20,000 subscribers on YouTube with his poetic voiceovers and thoughtful approach to his running career at the ripe age of 22. 22. He's in his final year of college, sponsored by multiple athletic brands, currently building his own entrepreneurial empire in a brand named Over Everything Athletics Club. If it isn't obvious, our connection to Brock is mostly through me and my journey in the running world. But what's so fascinating about this conversation will be the intersection of filmmaking, storytelling, and entrepreneurship, void of the niche of running entirely. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brock Kelly.
Mr. Brock Kelly.
Dude, so happy to be here. Excited to dig into some things, talk about entrepreneurship, talk about the Daily Mile, talk about everything.
Let's go, man.
I'm open with whatever today. I don't even know.
Yeah, we didn't really give much of a rundown beforehand, but we'll just explore. A lot of the guest episodes we do, we try to have like a loose outline on our end, but then just like leave room for exploration and rabbit holes and all that good stuff. So
yeah, if you're not familiar with Rally Caps and you just came here for the creative stuff and like camera talk and whatever, the context is I run and I've been running for a while, and it's a reoccurring theme on the podcast. That I always want to talk about it, and today we finally get to talk a bit about running. But
I gave Eric a very strong stipulation.
But as much as I would love to talk about running the entire time, we would love to tap into the genius that is Brock Kelly on the creative side, on the filmmaking side, and entrepreneurship, especially at such a young age. It's been insanely impressive to see what you've done near and far over the past year. And I'm going to do my best to tell the story and then you could revise it if you want along the way, because I didn't want to go the typical, like, where'd you start? How'd you blah, 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 did it? But
that's how it always starts.
Yeah. So we're not going to go there because, yeah, on the surface level, if people look at your stuff on Instagram, on YouTube, it's very clear that you are a filmmaker, that you're not just posting content, that you're not just whipping out the iPhone and doing whatever. And so the way I want to start this conversation is when did filmmaking start for you on a serious level? And did YouTube inspire the start of that specifically?
I would say over the years, I've just accrued a pretty good bit of knowledge from watching YouTube videos and watching other creators on YouTube. I picked up a camera for the first time really when I was probably 5 years old or something. My grandfather, he allowed me to go and he was a journalist.
Oh.
And he like wrote articles in the paper. He used to be a news anchor.
Yeah.
And he was pretty big in
in the Bay Area,
Chicago.
Right?
He was in Chicago. He was in San Francisco. He was in all around the US, New York, Honolulu, all over the place. But in his later years, after he kind of retired, he was writing news stories on Mississippi history. And at that point, I was around, and he would bring me around, and I would snap some photos at some of these locations, wherein he'd bring me along for some of the stories whenever he was researching them. And so that was kind of the first time I ever picked up a camera, which is kind of cool. And those would end up in the newspaper. So I would see the photos that I took, and it would be kind of a transfer over to like, oh, wait, that ended up in the newspaper. That was really cool. That's a cool connection. And that's the earliest memory I kind of have with the camera. And then kind of I started doing photography, 8th grade, did that through high school somewhat. And then 11th grade year, started making videos on YouTube. A lot of it was inspired by watching other creators. So other runners in the running space. And I was in 11th grade and I'm like, oh, well, I run. I can make videos about running. So I started making YouTube videos about running, and they weren't great. They were just like, here's a camera, here's a timeline. And I remember editing on like this old crappy Toshiba computer, worst videos ever, worst editing software ever. Like it would take so long to render everything. You would just like drag a clip into the timeline and it would take years. So like the first video I edited, it could have probably been done in 3 hours and it ended up taking 12. And it's just one of those things where you're just trying to drag it in and you have to wait for like 45 seconds for each clip to render in, and you're trying to cut it, but you can't even cut well. It was just so many inefficiencies with that initial process. But then throughout high school, I kind of just kept making videos, and I was like, this is kind of fun. I just enjoyed the how 3 dimensional it was. I enjoyed the process of creating the videos and making it just felt like it was so much more than photos could be.
Mm.
Even though photos can go really deep, but it just felt like there were layers on layers on layers on layers, and the possibilities were endless. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. Like it's like photos, but it's way more complex. And so kind of started messing around with that. And I guess the first real experience I got in videography was in, I'm trying to think. It was probably, I mean, I was making YouTube videos obviously throughout high school, 11th, 12th grade year. And then freshman year in college, I was making videos about the cross country team, about running, about the season and stuff like that, just for the fun of it. And I remember I got hurt, I think, that year. So I wasn't making a ton. And it was kind of like a tough creative block. But then after that injury and stuff, started shifting into I went to a camp and I worked at this summer camp for 2 months, 2.5 months over the entire summer. Got there middle of May and left in August. And so big stint and I was hired as the primary videographer for this camp. And so at that point, you're asked to make a video every 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, I was sitting there and I was like, okay, well, I have deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
I have things that I need to create. And I've only ever created YouTube videos. I have no clue what they're expecting. And I'd seen some of the work that the other creators in this space, like the people that had come in and been videographers, I'd seen the work that they had done. And I was like, okay, well, they've done really good stuff. And so I kind of want to live up to that expectation. So I had a little bit of pressure on I put a little bit of pressure on myself, and I was like, I want to make the best videos that I can possibly make for this camp. And so I started just really trying to dig deep into these camp videos. It was like a bunch of high schoolers that are at this camp or even younger sometimes. And it's like, I just want to make them the best piece of content that they can have.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, they don't care how good the video is.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to be in the video. Like it could be the worst video ever and edited to music. And they're like, oh, this is so exciting. But for me, I was like, I don't want to make the best thing I possibly can. And so I started really honing in my skills, really working on the craft from that perspective, and got pretty good at just making videos overall. And what I realized is that I guess from there, it ended up being more of, I guess I just kind of kept trying to make good videos. And at the end of the summer, there was this one video that we really wanted to focus on. It was called the Camp Macon video. And Camp Macon was like their big outreach camp that the camp did. And so it wasn't just the kids that had signed up for the camp. It was actually like local kids in the community who were kind of from rough homes, impoverished families. And like, this was like the big video at the end of the year. And I wanted to make a really great video. Mm-hmm. And so I took all the skills that I'd learned throughout the summer and formed those into one video. And then it ended up being insane. And they were like, this is like one of the best videos we've ever seen. This is so sick. This is so cool. And I felt like from that camp experience, from just putting in those hours where I'm having to make a video every 3 or 4 days, I was able to produce something really great by the end of the summer, and the people really liked it. And so from there, I just kind of kept making videos and kept documenting the seasons. I guess after that year was my sophomore year in college, and kind of kept documenting running and things like that on YouTube, and kind of did the same thing my junior year. That was this past year. I actually moved out, did a similar thing because I was working with 10 Man Elite the summer before my junior year, professional running brand. They're out in Boulder, Colorado. So they hired me. I went out there. I was their intern, and I made their content for pretty much the entire summer. So that was another time where I could actually put in some hours and learn some more about content creation, which was what I was trying to do. It was something that I was kind of learning. It was like, okay, how can I make the best videos that I can possibly make? How can I make videos that are going to do well on their channel? What can I learn from their analytics that is going to transfer over to what I can do in my own videos and stuff? And so I was making their videos, and I was also making my own videos at the same time. And my videos started kind of getting some traction on YouTube. I think that's when Eric actually found me. Mm-hmm. Was that summer. Yep. And he found the YouTube videos and stuff. He was like, this stuff's cool. I was like, yeah, man, appreciate it. And so from that point forward, it was kind of, I realized I could talk to a camera decently well, and I could film things from unique angles. And it was kind of like, okay, it's that same 3-dimensional aspect that I'd always connected to. And then after that season, or I kind of went through the first half of that season and ended up getting a stress fracture, was out for like a few months. And at that point, that's when I started the Daily Mile. And
Which I'm going to get
the
to and
Daily
I'm going to
Mile,
explain.
we can, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
we
going to
can
do
get,
that
we can get to the Daily Mile.
because I'm stoked about that. And I
Yeah.
love, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that specifically. What's so fun about your story is that you have this, a couple of like very unique and prolific things that you are saying yes to all the time. It's that you're like saying yes to reps, you're saying yes to consistency, and you're saying yes to opportunity. It feels like every single time you're presented with something when it comes to filmmaking throughout the years, you know, I'd say pretty seriously now, you've been doing it for 7 years of just saying yes every summer opportunity you get, every chance you get to make something for yourself or your own brand, or someone asks you to make something, whether it's a high ticket item or not, if it's paid or not, you're choosing to put in the reps. And I think that's what's been so apparent in your work is that it's clearly grown quickly because you keep experimenting, you keep putting in those reps. And yes, I did find you 2 summers ago. You're out in Colorado, and in that, at the end of that summer, you were doing high mileage. You ran over 100 miles a week, which in the running world, that's crazy. It's a lot of miles.
It's like all the miles I've run ever, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1 week.
In 1 week. Yeah.
In 1 week.
And so you get this stress fracture, and you're put in this position where I think it's safe to say a lot of your identity is wrapped up in your running, and a lot of your filmmaking is wrapped up in running in general. And so you're sent back to Mississippi, you're sent back to school, and you're like, well, what do I do here? And people love to preach consistency. But I'm just interested in hearing, like in this story specifically, what consistency meant to you with building something like the Daily Mile, with knowing that it was different and that it was unique. And before you answer that, I'll give a little bit more context on the Daily Mile. Brock decided to go to Instagram and every single day create this really meaningful video every day to what ended up being 100 days. And along, I think, number 60 something, where like you were getting some traction analytically, but by the time 60 or 65 rolled around, you get this message from Nick Bear and BPN, Bear Performance Nutrition, a big brand in the athletic space, in the gym world, in the running world. And Nick's like, I love these videos. Do you want to be a BPN athlete? And you're just like, yeah,
Sure.
I do. Like, and you love the brand already. You're kind of like, wow, I can't believe you're DMing me. But those videos right around that time blew up. Some of them are getting over 100,000 views. And really, like the marker there is the intentionality of cinematography, your voiceovers and how intentional those voiceovers are and were. But then going back to that question with the consistency, because I think what really kind of frustrates us is when we hear and see people champion this, like, just keep making, make, go,
Yeah.
go, do, where then you see so many people execute that and then still not find success in it because there is no X factor. There is nothing differentiating the consistent production. What was your feeling in that? In all of that, you're like, I'm going to hammer this consistency, because I know in the story, you started feeling a lot of fatigue. Like, this isn't getting enough traction. I think you got enough. I mean, some of your videos maybe getting 4,000 or 5,000 views on Instagram. I think a lot of people would be really satisfied with that. But you were unsatisfied because you knew, like, I need to break through a new threshold to be able to get brand deals, to be able to build a business. And so what was that thing that, like, drove you to keep going in that consistency?
I would say a lot of it went back to my support structure at that time. It was like my friends that were there that were watching the videos, that were, because a lot of the people who were seeing those videos were just the followers that I had at that time. I think the magic number, once I hit episode 46, was that magic number. So I was making these videos where I was editing 2 or 3 hours a day on each video, and I started it, and it was like I was going to make videos for 7 days. And I was like, let's just make a video series for 7 days and see what happens. And then like it didn't do very well, and I was like, well, I'm only gonna get better, I guess. And so kind of just kept making videos, and I was like, I'll make it to 30 days and we'll see what happens. Because at that time, I mean, I'm not really running. I'm going to swim at the pool every day, but even then, it's like a new activity. It's something that I hadn't done before, so it's not something I'm used to. So I can't swim for 10 hours a week. Like it's like I just got to keep my head afloat and like swim for like 30 minutes a day and survive. So I had a little bit extra free time, and I'm like, like let's make these videos. This is gonna be sick. And I would say like definitely the support structure I had. I remember talking to my girlfriend whenever I made it to like episode 30, and it was her and like her roommate at the time, and they were like, people love these videos. Like these are so sick, but like no, you're not getting any traction on them, but people love the videos. You should keep making them. And I'm like, I had like such a tough time just being like okay.
But that doesn't like that's not what I'm trying to achieve here. Because that's I guess a follow-up question is like, are you doing it to just get more reps, or is it a combination of you want to get more reps and you want to grow something? Like what was that fire in your belly? What did that feel like?
So I've always had that idea that what I was creating was going to be a foundation for a business in some way. I remember watching running YouTubers like Ryan Trahan, who's now one of the most successful YouTubers in general at this point. Doing a great job, but he used to be a running YouTuber. He used to make running content. He used to run for Texas A&M. I started following him back whenever he was in high school. He had 2K subs, and now he has
crazy.
15 million. And so I've watched this growth from 2K to 15 million, and I've been like, whoa. Wow. And I remember when he had like he started a water bottle company. He started all this other stuff, these entrepreneurial endeavors that he was building. He was using his social platform to build the brand. And he was building his brand on top of the social platform that he was creating. Yeah. I remember watching this and being like, oh, wow, okay, wait, this is something that I could potentially do. I don't want to take a traditional route. I don't want to just like go to business school and then start a business out of business school with the business school things and business school. I just didn't want to do that. And I kind of realized I'm going to use the skill that I have in content creation in filmmaking to create a foundation of some sort through YouTube, through Instagram, whatever the means ends up being, to build a brand. And with that brand, I'm going to continue growing it through the use of social media, which is something that I've just kind of always had in the back of my mind. So that's always been a driving factor ever since I started making videos whenever I was in 11th grade. It was like, someday I want to be able to do this and be able to actually build a brand off of this. Once I got, I guess, beyond that, was that feeling of, okay, I'm just going to keep putting in these reps and I'm going to see what happens, because at some point I'm going to figure out how to make better content. I'm going to figure out how to make better videos, and the repetitions are what's going to create that. Because if I look back at the first video I created, I thought it was good and it wasn't. And if I look back at the fifth video I created, I thought it was good, but it wasn't. And so I was kind of like letting down my ego and being like, well, like the videos aren't going to be that good, but we're just going to keep putting in the repetitions until they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of the similar, I guess, climax that I reached whenever we were in Boulder, whenever I was in Boulder with 10 Man Elite. It was like that was a similar conclusion that I was able to come to whenever it was like, yeah, we're at this point in the journey where the videos are starting to get recognition. They're starting to get traction. They've always been decent, but now it's providing value to an audience, and now I'm taking the content I'm creating and it's giving more value to the audience. And a lot of it was that perspective of how can I create more value for the audience, because whenever I first started making videos, it was kind of more for me. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, I just want to do this as a kind of creative outlet, and it's really cool. And then as I have matured a little bit more, it's been like, what value can I provide to the audience? And I feel like you can't get away from that. Mm-hmm. You can't get away from how can I provide the audience value through the piece of content that I'm creating, through what I'm creating in this film. You have to kind of stay true to that, especially on YouTube, especially on Instagram, because so many people are just trying to waste your time. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be one of those people that waste their time. I want people to come to my videos and be like, oh, I actually learned something from this. I got value from this. Yeah. And it's really cool to see those connections like in person. I went to a cross country meet this past weekend.
Nice.
And I like met 10, there were like 10, 15 people that came up to me throughout the course of the meet and they were like, yo, I love your videos. You really helped me this summer. They really helped me with this. And like, I'm like, oh, that's like super cool.
Yeah.
For people to be like, your videos really helped me get through my injury. Your videos really helped me get through my summer of training. Your videos really helped me to have a breakthrough in this race, or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they're telling me this, like, oh, I love the stuff you're producing. And that to me is also super valuable, to have people that say that. And so there's a lot of dimensions to being someone who makes videos on the internet. And it's just it's an interesting path to take. I think it's very non-traditional. I think in a lot of ways my dad was always kind of envisioned me going more of a traditional route. He was like, oh, you can go and get a degree and be an investment business school, doing the business things, and be an investment banker or something. And I was like, no, don't think so. Or like med school. You can go to med school. You can be a doctor. And I was like, well, I could, but I don't want to give my life away to that. Like, I'd much rather do something else that it's respectable.
It feels like the intention that you bring to the platform and what you're describing right there is that differentiating factor where you really pretty early on figured out a why and a purpose there, instead of just being algorithm chasing. What sound is viral now? What am I gonna, what kind of thirst trap can I put over this viral sound? You have the looks to be a thirst trap. I mean, come on.
Yeah. If I wanted to, I guess I could.
But the reality is, like, your foundation is intentions, and that's what brings us to OE and your tagline of intentions over everything. And this business and this brand that you're creating, Over Everything Athletics Club, let's hear more about that. Like, you sent the hat to me the other day. I love it on the inside or in the back. It's intentions over everything. Love the design. So cool. It's so cool to see you make intentional merch and clothing, like not stuff that's just, like just branded, but has that intentionality, has meaning behind it, really tells a story. But then also, like, the fact that this shirt is oversized and it's like, it's part of your, like, the way you like to wear shirts. And
it's not a running shirt, it's just an oversized t-shirt. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. and that, like, based on your crowd and what they probably, especially the connection, like those kids coming up to you, is like they see themselves in you, they can relate to you. And so if you provide something that, that you're selling, or you're building a business that reminds them of that brings them into that fold, they're going to feel that and want to purchase or be a part of it in some capacity. So really the question I have here is, like, what do you see OE becoming? And love the logo. It's so sick. Like, I look at it and I'm thinking, is this going to be a New Balance someday? Is this going to be an XYZ someday? What are your thoughts and feelings on that?
What's our time at?
Shoot, great question.
I wanted to check that because I think we're getting close.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Ooh, 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I'd say just flip it now.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll pause it and
let's
get it going again.
Actually, now that we're at like a break point, I want to hear more about OE in a second, especially just on the design level and the merch and everything, because that's another passion of mine. But I also kind of want to close the loop on the filmmaking side of things that we just talked about too, because everything that you were saying about improving and consistency and getting better and looking back on your previous work and realizing, like, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was at the time, but then seeing how much better you've gotten and seeing that marked progress. So much of that was reminding me a lot of Casey Neistat, honestly, because of the the daily vlog component, making something every day and putting yourself in a situation where you are simply getting better because you are holding yourself to a certain standard and a certain rhythm. And I think the amount of volume that you've done in the situations, kind of what you mentioned first at summer camp, and then with Tin Man, and then with Daily Mile, it almost seems like each situation was this progressive ramp up as far as timing is concerned. It's like, first you have a couple days to do it, then you have a few less days to do it, and then you're committing to doing something every single day. Not only is that consistency amazing, but you see the improvement in it. It's like what Casey said at some point, like anecdotally, is like, make something bad, make it better, make it good, make it great. And it kind of just follows that philosophy of, like, done is better than perfect, and getting something out there. It might not be up to the same standard that you might have for yourself, but your standard for yourself changes too over time. And that is always going to be this, like, North Star that keeps getting higher and higher. So I just want to like note that and applaud you for that, because I think it's a really cool mentality to have when it comes to making anything, really, because that perfectionism can be super crippling for a lot of us, and myself included.
Me too.
On a workflow front, I'm sure each of the situations that you were in, from summer camp to Tin Man to Daily Mile, you probably learned a lot just on a production side of things too, how to make things faster, how to make them higher quality, how to edit everything and compile everything, because you have to be pretty on top of your game if you're going to commit to editing and shooting schedules like that. What are some workflow tips you could share for filmmakers out there on kind of like, and anything that you learned between those three scenarios that you found yourself in?
Yeah, so every scenario is kind of different, and I'm finding, we'll start with this first. Just I'm finding that whenever I've always thought that like creativity didn't need a ton of structure. It's like you kind of create whenever you want to create, and I'm finding that when I have more structure, I create better. And right now I'm in like a little bit more of an unstructured phase, and I'm like, I need to figure out what my next structure is. It's like each component, whenever we go back to the summer camp, whenever we go back to Tin Man, whenever we go back to the Daily Mile, those all three had structure. And because of that, it's like, I don't know what my next big thing is going to be that I'm going to be making. Maybe it's like YouTube videos every 3 days or something. And it's like, if I can make those videos consistently with that structure of like, oh yeah, I need to get one out every 3 days, then that's something that really helps me. And because at the end of that 3 days, you're putting out a video, there's no, and if you don't make negotiations with yourself, I mean, things can happen. Like
Sure.
your car can get stuck in New Mexico, and you can be like traveling around the country and like no time to edit and
That's
all
like
this
weirdly
crazy
specific.
stuff. Yeah, oddly. I don't know I don't know where that all came from, but all of those components have structure to them. And I think as a creator, as someone who's making something, as a filmmaker, you sometimes need that structure, even though you want it to be on the creative side of your brain. You want the creative things to happen, but that structure is what limits the perfectionism, like you were talking about. It limits that, oh, it has to be perfect. It has to be all the way. I made a video about that the other day, was talking about like, I could sit down and I could edit a video for 40 hours if I wanted to. Like any video. Choose a video, I could edit it for 40 hours and it would be super sick. But like after probably 10 hours of editing on that same video, or maybe 8 hours of editing, there's not that much more value added to the end consumer. It may be added to like the film geek. Like they may be like, oh, that was really cool on that dolly right there, or like whatever it is, and it's like, like that was super cool shot right there. And then for everyone else, they're like, I didn't even notice that. And so whenever you get on that structure, whenever you get that ability to, I guess, whenever you have that structure in your creative process, I think it makes you create more, and it makes you get those reps in and learn more about creating quickly, which sometimes is a good thing for people who are more creative minded, because sometimes the creative process can drag on for as long as you want it to. And so having those deadlines, having that, oh yeah, I need to have this done in 3 days or have it done in a day, or have it done whenever, having that deadline is, I think, so important for creators to have. And I'm speaking this to myself at this point right now, because I don't have a ton of deadlines right now. I finished up the summer, and it was kind of like, okay, we're transitioning into a new phase. We're into a new season. We're into some new things, trying to figure out what's happening consistently. There's a lot of things in life. You get sick. Like I was sick for the last 2.5 weeks, and it's like, oh, what do I do here? And it's, but I found that I'm my most creative. I found that I create the best content whenever I do have that structure. And as far as workflow goes, I would honestly, it just took trial and error of figuring out how to make videos quickly. Like the first few videos you make, they're going to take longer because you don't know what you're doing. You're like, let's try this out, and let's drag this clip in. Let's see if we can color grade like this. So you're going to take more time most likely. And then as you get a little bit more throughout, like if you're making a video every day for 50 days, or every day for 100 days, every day for a week, by the time you get to the end of that week, that 50 days, that 100 days, you've kind of streamlined your process. So you're no longer having to take 4.5 hours to edit a video. It may just be 2 hours. And I was like, okay, I can get this edit done in 2 hours. And I can figure out exactly like how this video structure works, and I know kind of what works, and I know how to add value to the consumer, and like you just start to kind of figure these things out. They become more intuitive than anything else.
Yeah, the things
And
that
so-
were like difficult in the beginning all of a sudden just become commonplace. Like if you're shooting log, you know how to color grade it really quickly.
Yeah.
If you automate subtitles, you're like, oh, with the amount of reps, you can kind of, I equate it to fluency of language. Like if you're practicing on Duolingo every day, you're going to be more conversational in 2 months from now. Like it's just the same kind of, it feels like the same kind of brain stimulus, and that can only be done with reps. And so, yeah, I guess more of a bit more of a geekier level. Like, are you shooting in log? Are you editing in Final Cut?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ooh, Final Cut user.
Got
Okay.
Yeah, I started on Final Cut, and Final Cut was the way that I always kind of went, and just have kept it. It's cool, gets the job done, and it's not like that different than any of the other editing softwares.
Yeah.
I feel like if I got DaVinci, I would just sit there and like mess with the nodes forever,
Until
and
you're
that would
really
just
fluent at
that
it.
would yeah, and like that would just ruin the streamline process. I would just sit there and I would obsess about, oh, like this blue isn't quite right, and then I'd never get a video out.
Yeah. But
And
you're
I think-
also
I think
shooting on
it'd be super cool.
873 too as well.
Yeah,
3 as
I'm
well.
shooting on an A7 III, shooting S-Log 3. And so I bring all the footage in, and I shoot everything in 4K. Bring all that footage in. I have a Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter lens with 2.8. It's just a solid lens. And then I also have a 17 to 28, which covers the lower end, so I can get those wider shots if I want to. But whenever I shoot, I just bring the camera around, usually set it up on a tripod, or like whenever I was doing the Daily Mile and stuff, I would just bring the camera itself, and I would just find cool places to put it. Mm-hmm. It fell one
Small
time
places.
and like destroyed my lens.
Oh no!
So I had to get a new lens at one point, but other than that, like it was a pretty good process, and I would just set up the camera in random places and film stuff, and then whenever I would go into post, I would drag all those clips in. I would import everything that I'd filmed throughout the day, and I had like all these events. I had like an event created in Final Cut. I guess it was I guess you have libraries, and then with the libraries you have the events, and with the events you have the projects. So I had like a library, and then the events were under that. So that would be each day would be an event.
Okay.
And then the projects would be within the events. So if I needed to make like a YouTube video from some of the content I was making, I would have like 2 projects under an event, under whatever that day was. And so if I filmed like a lot of stuff, then it would all go in that event. Sometimes it slowed down whenever I had like a bunch of stuff there, so I'd have to like clear some of the data and stuff. But it was pretty efficient, I would say. Then I'd take those clips and I would kind of go through and just kind of figure out what I wanted, drag them into the timeline. And then I would, once I had that timeline kind of created, that's usually when I do voiceover. So from there, some of the scripts I would I would sit down at the computer, have nothing written, and I would just sit there and just like record voiceover, and I would just talk. I'd be like, just come up with an idea off the top of my head. That wasn't the most efficient way to do it, because sometimes I'd sit there and I'd do like 180 takes, and it would be like a 60-second video with 180 takes, and I'd be like,
Oh my
well,
goodness.
maybe there's a better way to do this. And so kind of figured that out. But that's how I did kind of the first 100 days or so of the Daily Mile. It was
Wow.
just kind of like, oh yeah, we're just going to sit down at the computer. I have no clue what I'm going to talk about today. But in a lot of ways, it was like I was journaling. It's like, oh, this is a way to like decompress. This is a way to actually get my thoughts out and put it into a video to utilize the skills that I have to get my thoughts out that are potentially going to be able to help other people.
Yeah.
And it was kind of this cool combination of what a daily vlog used to be, of like, let me get these thoughts out. Let me tell you about what I did today, and let me put this into a video where you can watch it and be entertained, or you can get something valuable from it. And so then I would record the voiceover, had the timeline created with the clips, record the voiceover. Once I got the voiceover done, I'd like combine all the clips together, mess with the EQ a little bit, make sure it sounded all right, make sure it sounded crispy. And then from there, I would color grade. And then the titles, like the captions and stuff, were usually... So I have like an auto generator in Final Cut. Final Cut doesn't have one built in, so you have to get a plugin, which is kind of annoying, but it builds the titles out for you with the plugin that I got. And so I had it builds out all the titles for you. So you had to go in, you had to kind of format them. You have to fix the spelling mishaps and stuff, and you kind of had to fix the timing a little bit. So that's the process that honestly takes the longest.
Yeah.
Is going back and like making sure those titles are lined up, and they aren't always perfect, and I just kind of deal with it. But making sure those titles are lined up, and then from there, I guess it's color grading. So color grading, I kind of just have like a LUT that I'll use, like a lookup table, and I'll take that and I'll put that on the footage, and then I'll go and I'll adjust the S-curves a little bit. So I'll put the lookup table on there. It's like one that's designed for log, and so I'll put it on 60 or 70% intensity based with the color grading software that I have in Final Cut Pro, and then I'll go back and I'll mess with the curves a little bit so I can add a little bit more depth into each of the videos. And sometimes it works really well and sometimes it doesn't, and at the end of the day I put out another video, and if it's bad I'll put out another one the next day.
Well, I think that's what's great about your process too, is just I think a lot of filmmakers get really stuck on, again, perfectionism, like making sure every single part of that process is perfect. And I feel like I fall way more into your camp of just like, if I have a good final product that's going to hopefully help someone, either their own personal life or their business or whatever the case is, that's the win. And along the way, I'm going to learn more of the process of how to do it better and more efficiently. And that seems to be the story for you as well. I think what's fascinating is it's now giving you the opportunity to work with brands, to launch over everything. We were going to talk.
We can get into the brand. Yeah.
What does over everything look like? What is it going to be?
So over everything it was built off this idea. I was kind of in a rut, and as an athlete, as a content creator, as a filmmaker, as an entrepreneur, you get in ruts. It's bound to happen. And whenever I got into a rut, it was kind of intentionality was the one thing that I was like, this is something that I need to be intentional about. I need to start putting like the correct eggs in the correct basket, I guess. That's a kind of, I don't know if that's a saying, but we're going to make it one. We're going to make it a saying. Yep,
we're going to put it on a t-shirt.
That's the next Over Everything shirt.
Yeah, we're gonna put it on a shirt. Correct eggs in the correct basket. It's going to be, we'll launch it at Easter. So that's kind of what I was thinking, and it was like, usually it would be a tough time. So I remember one of what started the company pretty much was I was in this rut at the end of cross country season. This was my sophomore year. So I'd had a pretty good summer of training. I had a decent season, ran some pretty fast times on the grass. And then by the end of the year, I got the flu, was out for regionals. So I had about a week before regionals, and then nationals was 3 weeks later. And I was like, oh, okay, like, let me take a week and a half off, see if I can rest and recover. And so you take a week and a half off of training, and then you try to build back in, and then you have to go run the national championship. It didn't go well. I tried to do the best that I could whenever I got out there. I could not get my legs under me, just could not run. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, my breathing's okay because I knew I was physically fit, but like my body was still just so tired from recovering from this flu. And I was not able to get it. And so we were in Seattle, it's snowing. We're actually in Tacoma next to this big lake, and it's snowing and all this. And we're out there and we're against the fastest people in the country, and you're just like trying to hold on. And so we went out, and it was super crowded in the first mile, and then people just kept passing me, and I moved straight to the back. And so I'm sitting here, I'm just like walking this thing in, and I look at my coach, I'm like, Coach, I don't know, like I feel bad. Like I was literally talking to him in the middle of the race. My parents were there too, so I'm talking to my parents. I'm like, hey, like I don't know, I just don't feel good today. Like I can talk fine, but my legs are not moving right now. And it was kind of just that, from that moment forward, it was like, okay, like I was in a tough mental headspace. Obviously, at the end of that, like you train for the national championship from May to December, and then you run the national championship, and it goes terribly, and you're like, you kind of beat yourself up over it, or at least I did. And so I said, well, I need to be more intentional about practicing the right habits. I need to just start digging down and come back and have a comeback from this. Like, there's nothing that is gonna, if I just sit and I just complain about this for the rest of my life, or for the rest of the season, or for the rest of the year, then that's not gonna get me anywhere. And I realized, okay, well, I need to take intentional action to be more intentional about the habits that I'm taking to be a better athlete. So I started like doing crazy stuff. I started going to like the cold plunge every morning at 5 a.m. and I'd show up there and I'd just sit there and it was crazy because we had practice at 5:45, so I'd go to the cold plunge before practice and just sit there like up to my neck for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'd be like, all right, let's go to practice. And so I'd go to practice, and I just did this like every morning for a little while, and until I could kind of get back on my feet. And so I kind of started slowly getting back on my feet. I remember I was wearing a Whoop at the time, so it tracks like your recovery and stuff. My recovery for for like a month straight was probably 15%.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I think it was like, I guess, mental stress and stuff and just like physical strain that I was putting on myself as well.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, we're pretty low right here. Let's make something out of this. And so just kind of started practicing the right things. And I was like, at some point I'll turn around. And by the time I got to the indoor track season, things started looking up. Like I was running pretty well on the track, running pretty fast times. I was mentally sharp. I was running fast races. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm going to create a brand off of this concept of being intentional, taking intentional actions. And I guess the brand actually started a little bit before the season itself. The idea of intentions over everything started a little bit before the season itself. It started the summer whenever I was creating videos. And so this is a creative podcast. It started that summer whenever I was creating videos, and I was kind of bored with the stuff I was making. I was like, I'm making running videos, but it's kind of boring right now. What do I do? And so I just kind of went back to why I started making videos, just to have fun and to make content with my friends, and that's what I did. And I did that kind of towards the end of the summer, and it was super fun. And the videos were cool and edited to fun music, and I can look back on those videos and be like, man, this was like a super fun time in my life. And that intentionality, once I carried that over into the season, and then by the end of the season, didn't really go very well. And so I had to like revamp that, start practicing better habits, become intentional about practicing those habits. And then from there, built the brand on the idea of being intentional in your actions and practicing better habits and moving from there to get yourself out of a rut, to get yourself, whenever you're in a tough situation. Like that was the thought process there. And then like I had a super successful indoor season and ended up having a pretty good track season too. And then that following summer was when I went to Boulder. And I was like, all right, let's do this thing. So that's why I started 100-mile weeks. And
yeah, it's really cool to see you. I mean,
going insane.
Yeah, and then get injured.
And then I got injured.
I think what's really fascinating about it is just like your commitment to process, to consistency, to showing up, to bettering your skills. Finally gave you this opportunity to have these drops where you have this merch that actually means something, and then you completely sell out. Like it's, it goes live, you sell out, and that's a testament to the intentionality, to the words that you're speaking every day. The amount of work that you're putting into each 1-minute video, which I wanted to say earlier is a much more sustainable way to do some sort of daily posting than what Casey was doing. Which was psycho.
Casey was making like 10-minute videos every day.
It was ridiculous.
For 800 days.
Yeah.
He was going insane by the end of that. Like he talks about it. He talks about how insane he was going.
Nearly ruined his life. But the fact that you put so much intentionality into each of those videos with actually doing a voiceover, with communicating something that was meaningful and not just, surface level, then created trust with an audience that wanted to partake in that as well and support you in your endeavors moving forward. So I think if that's a testament to anything that you want to be doing in the future, whether it's growing OE or something completely different, not even running related, that consistency to showing up and intentionality in showing up is going to be what makes you successful. And so I think really just kind of closing the conversation, being that it started with, where you started in filmmaking, could you see yourself moving into filmmaking or using this medium of storytelling in a different capacity that's even outside of running? Or is that just a lane that you want to stick in now to then grow in the future? Like I was just listening to the Life in Stride podcast with Dom Schluter, and he was saying, like, I don't want to be podcasting in this niche forever. I want to build something beyond this, and I know that now. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think at some point I'll probably get out of the running space. I think everyone at some point has to move on from what you're doing. Whenever I started making videos, it was about running. And then I got to experiment with a few different things. Like whenever I went to the camp, like the camp was not about running at all. But I still had that opportunity, and I loved what I was doing there at the camp. So I think I can find love in what I'm doing. I think I can enjoy what I'm doing no matter what the content really is. If there's a good story there, then if there's a good story that people are going to find value in, then that's something that I want to be a part of. I want to be able to tell that story. And I've kind of always had that draw. So maybe the story is about running, maybe the story involves running, but maybe it's about something completely different. Maybe it's a documentary about someone and and what they've done. And I could see myself moving into that space, but for now it's kind of like running is what I do. I'm still in college. Like I'm in my 5th year in college right now. So getting my master's, and it's just kind of, it's running is what I'm doing right now. So it makes more sense to make content about the running, to make videos about the running, to try to tell my story as a runner. But at some point, I could definitely see myself moving more into the filmmaking world, or moving more into the business world, really investing into like the brand and stuff, and just seeing where that goes. I think like after college, I want to take like a year to just, I might be training, I might try to run a marathon and stuff, but just a year to kind of dig into YouTube, dig into making videos, creating content there, and seeing what happens. Just no strings attached, no nothing. Like I'm free now. Let me see what I can do. Yeah. And I think that would be really cool. But I have to be careful as well about making sure there's enough structure there.
Right. That's the thing. What you said earlier, because we had a episode not that long ago that was like creativity needs boundaries.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that whole idea, and I've been learning that like crazy for myself as well, that I thrive in that structure. I think that's why a lot of the running stuff we've been making has been successful, because it's like that weekly rhythm. And then my main channel, same thing. Like back in the day, I felt that need to like consistently put something out of quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you were to then jump into YouTube in the same way you jumped into Instagram and the Daily Mile, which I did not preface that the Daily Mile is not from running. It was actually from you swimming a mile every day because you were injured. It was interesting. But if you apply that same principle and then give yourself structure like you did in that, where it's like, it's with YouTube, you're not committing to post every day, but maybe that is a weekly rhythm. Maybe that's twice a week, or if you have enough time to do that stuff, that you're going to see the same result with the intentionality that you bring to the table.
I think that's kind of where I want to move at some point. I want to, it's tough, you know, in the being a creator, being a filmmaker, trying to figure out which platform you're really going to invest your time into, because I've talked about this on other podcasts, but it's like you only have so much bandwidth you can give.
Yep.
So it's like, and maybe you have more bandwidth than you think whenever you get into the right structure, and you can do more than you think you can, which is usually the case. But you only have so much bandwidth that you can invest into a platform. And so I could go all in on Instagram and completely neglect YouTube, or I could go all on YouTube and completely neglect Instagram. Trying to find that balance between the two can be really challenging.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of found whenever you're making daily content on Instagram. It's kind of like hard to like make a video every day and then sit down, like edit for 2 hours and then sit down and be like, oh, time to make a YouTube video.
Yeah,
like,
it's really hard to break that rhythm.
You've already been editing for 2 hours that day. And you've already had to create like a brand new idea.
People try to hack the system, and successfully do in parts, with like using YouTube as the main source and then cutting it down to short form after. But I think in your situation, that doesn't necessarily work, because you're missing all the intentionality of what makes it special in the short form, right? Because people are used to a dumbed down version of the big thing on the short form, and that's what people's method is most of the time, and it just kind of feels recycled. And that's why I feel like that's why the Daily Mile pushes through so much, because they're like, no one's making stuff with this much intentionality, with a voiceover like this, with filming this way, just for the sake of the short form. So you have a point there. Maybe it's like you have a season of just doing Instagram for a while, and then you switch over to YouTube, and you kind of bounce back and forth. Yeah.
Which that's what I've kind of been doing. That's what a lot of what I've been doing has been. It's just like, oh yeah, like I want to make YouTube videos now. So I'm gonna make for the next month, 2 months, 3 months. I'm gonna make some YouTube videos. Oh, now I'm gonna go back, and it's fun because whenever you sit and you make short form videos for like a couple months, and you turn around and you start making long form videos, it's like, oh, this is fresh and new and exciting.
Yeah.
And then you start making those, it's like, oh, this is fun. And then you kind of, maybe you can make them until you get tired of making long form videos. And then you're like, oh, well, I'll go back to the short form because that was fun and exciting.
It's good.
And it's kind of like it's a good cycle to get into. But that was kind of one of the toughest things, figuring out what worked and what didn't, and figuring out what platform I'm going to stick to, or like which platforms to go on to. And that's still something I'm kind of figuring out, but yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Brock, I'm going to ask you to cut your camera and re-roll one more time. Because I think you're about to be out of time on yours. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yeah. 5 seconds left. There we go. Perfect. And
check
as
my
you
pictures.
take care of that, I'm going to thank all the Rally Caps viewers and listeners for tuning into this episode with Brock. This has been an amazing conversation that's actually going to continue a little bit further over on our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/rallycaps. You can join for free if you just want to be a part of the community there. And if you want to hear the additional 20-minute episode that we're going to do with Brock over there, you can sign up for a paid subscription to just help support the show and offset the costs of everything we're doing here at Rally Caps. Let's plug Brock's stuff.
Yes.
Because this man is awesome.
You can find him on YouTube at Brock Kelly, and his Instagram is bkelly5192 to see all the short form goodness. And then, the OE Athletics Club tag on Instagram as well is where you can find over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And give it a watch. You won't be disappointed.
We'll link all of those below. And we'll also just ask you real quick as a parting favor to review the show. Rate it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, share it with a friend who might benefit from this conversation. Literally everything Brock said was just like wisdom after wisdom after wisdom. So please consider sharing it with other people in this space and in this industry, because I think it would really help other young filmmakers out there.
Truly. Yeah. A lot of people are kind of doing it by the seat of their pants, but to have some direction in the way that you've done it, I think is really wise for your age. And we just appreciate your time, you taking the time to give that to our audience. So thanks, man.
Yeah, it's been great.
Peace.
We'll see you in the next episode. I had that brief moment where I was like, wait, I forgot which way do I look?